Hi guys, in this lesson we're going to be adding and subtracting fractions that already have a common denominator, which is a little bit easier than the next fraction where they don't have a common denominator. So we're going to go through some steps, simplify it, and get it to be a lot nicer looking than it looks right now. Okay, so our first step is to look at the denominators, make sure they are the same, which they both are. That's perfect. We can add these two fractions since the denominators are the same. So when the denominators are the same, you keep the LCD when you're adding the two fractions or subtracting the two fractions. So in this case, the LCD is 3k to the second minus 19k plus 6. So all you're going to do is combine the like terms in those two numerators. So 3k, then we have a minus 2 plus a 1. Negative 2 plus 1 is minus 1 over our common denominator, which is 3k to the second minus 19k, and then plus 6. If you cannot factor the numerator anymore, put it in parentheses and then factor the denominator. So the denominator, we cannot do the AM method, even though it's a trinomial, because we have a coefficient in front of the k to the second. So we're going to do the AC method. So remember AC, this is your A, your B, and your C value. So AC, we also call it tricky trinomial, and it's going to turn into factoring by grouping. So we would multiply 3 times 6. That would give me 18. Now I'm not going to do anything with this 18, but I'm going to find two numbers that multiply to make 18, but add to make negative 19. And then I'm going to split the middle with those two numbers. So we're looking for two numbers that multiply to make positive 18, but add to make negative 19, which would be negative 18 and negative 1. So the first term stays the same. That stays as 3k to the second. Then it does not matter which one you write first. You usually want the first sign here to match the last sign, but in this case it can't because both numbers are negative. So it does not matter which one we put first. I'm going to put the 18. So minus 18k minus 1k, which is just k, and then plus 6. So we split the middle to be negative 18 and negative 1, which those two numbers multiply to make positive 18, but add to make negative 19. So if we actually combined those two like terms, they would equal negative 19. So we're just doing this so that we can do grouping. So then we're going to group these into two groups. We have 3k squared minus 18k, and then we have a k plus 6. So you would do the GCF of each group. So the GCF between 3k to the second and 18k is 3k. And when you divide that out, you're left with k minus 6. Now this GCF for k and 6 is actually just 1. So you bring down your minus sign, the GCF is technically 1, and you're left with k minus 6. Okay, because you're dividing a positive 6 by a negative 1. So k minus 6, if I distribute, negative 1 times k is negative k, that's what we want. And negative 1 times negative 6 makes our positive 6. And our last step is to look for the GCF that this term has in common with this term, and it's always, always, always going to be what's in the parentheses. This should always end up the same when you're doing grouping. So you write down their GCF, which is k minus 6. Now we're dividing the GCF out of these two terms. So it's going to cancel, and you're left with 3k minus 1. Okay, now all of this work was just for the denominator. So the denominator became this when we factored by, you can call it AC, a lot of teachers call it tricky trinomials, but when you get it into 4 terms, that is called grouping. So you're going to rewrite it. I'm going to erase this little 18m here. You're going to rewrite it as 3k minus 1 over the factored version of the denominator, which is k minus 6 times 3k minus 1. And now you just cancel out what's the same. 3k minus 1 cancels out with 3k minus 1. Most important thing to remember, when everything cancels out, either in the numerator or the denominator, there really is a number 1. Okay, it cancels out and becomes 1. So your final answer would be 1 over k minus 6. In our next problem, we are doing subtraction. So again, you want to make sure the denominators are the same, and in this lesson, they are always going to be the same for these two problems. So the LCD in this case would be 6x to the second minus 18x minus 60. Okay, so now all you have to do, put the numerators in parentheses, and combine like terms in the numerators. You have to remember that either you have to do keep, change, change, keep this one the same, change this to plus, make this a negative x and a positive 2, or remember to distribute the negative sign, which is how we're going to go through it. So x minus 5. Then I have a minus x, and it's a minus, you're subtracting a negative 2, so that would be plus 2 over 6x to the second minus 18x, and then minus 60. All right, then you can combine like terms in the numerator. X minus x is actually going to cancel. Negative 5 plus 2 is negative 3. Then you work with your denominator. So we have to factor. First thing we check for, no matter what expression you're looking at, is a GCF, which this has. So I'm going to factor it over here and then write my answer in the numerator, the denominator, once I'm all done. So I would factor out a GCF of 6. That would leave me with x to the second minus 3x minus 10. And then you would do the AM method. So two numbers that multiply to negative 10 but add to negative 3 would be negative 5 and positive 2. And then we're done factoring. So that's what you would put in your denominator. 6 times x minus 5 times x plus 2. So you can still simplify this. You have a monomial in the numerator and a monomial in the denominator. So if I just had negative 3 over 6 as its own little fraction all by itself, that would be able to simplify to negative 1/2. You can put this in your calculator. Your calculator will simplify it for you if you put it back into a fraction. So these are actually going to cancel and become negative 1 over 2. So your final answer would be negative 1. You can either put the negative in front of the fraction or in the numerator. So you can write it in the numerator, and then 2 times x minus 5 times x plus 2, or you can write it in front. So negative 1 over 2 times x minus 5 times x plus 2. Okay, so either one of these would be the correct answer. All right, I hope this helped. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to message me on Canvas, and good luck studying.